Chapter 9 Haughty and Not. Danny shut her phone off. She had received updates from Alexandra via text which cut the 90-minute waiting time down. She was not complaining at all. Showered, full, and feeling good, Danny saw the last text said that Alex was in the parking lot. Not wanting to burst from the teasing anticipation of the text messages, Danny shut her phone off and stood near the front door, peering through the peephole at the gated ledge for the first sign of Alex. She paid close attention to her breath as she watched, and felt her heartbeat, consciously trying to slow both to calm herself. This desire was more than she had known, and her own sense of reason was to be questioned. She was the older in this case. She had the responsibility of being the older. As much as she would want to throw caution to the wind and stand naked in the room upon Alexandra's entrance, she wanted to be sure that the lust was not simply overriding her lover's better judgment, but that it was a constituent component of her best judgment. They would not jump right to the wine. She would make sure the girl had eaten something so that the inebriation would not push her over the edge. She would let them talk, and then they would sit and touch. She had selected a specific song for their resting time. She quickly bounded across the room to verify that the song was queued up on her stereo, waiting for her push-button command to commence. She also verified that the remote was within her arm's reach on her makeshift coffee table. The two-room apartment, with the kitchen attached to the living space, was dimly lit thanks to the track lighting she herself had installed. Rather than using the fixtures that were in the apartment, she put in place her own source of illumination to sculpt her living space, and its effect upon her, in that most subtle yet important of ways. She looked at the 3 candles on the coffee table, with the box of matches next to them, and inhaled deeply through her nose, exhaling from her mouth. She thought she heard footsteps on the exterior stairs leading up from the ground floor to her apartment, and she pranced from the couch to the door again, angling herself to see the stairs. A figure reached the top, but was entirely too tall to be Alex, and turned in the direction away from her apartment upon reaching her floor. Danny exhaled and closed her eyes, resting her forehead on the door. She inhaled and pivoted her head to her right and looked through the door to her bedroom. It was dimly lit and clean, tidy and welcoming, and she allowed herself the moment of imagining Alexandra's bare skin upon the sheets. The door vibrated with the light knocking, and she turned swiftly to look, seeing the petite figure of Alex standing just beyond the door. Unlocking the door and throwing it open, her eyes drank in the powerful elixir that the lovely girl holding the bagged bottle of wine was to her mind. "Oh, thank goodness," the young goddess said, and strode into the apartment. "I was trying to walk really slow so the guy who was in front of me would stay in front of me, but he was walking so slow that it felt like an eternity just to get from the parking lot to here." During her unrhymed soliloquy, Alex had watched Danny close and lock the door, taking the bottle from her hand and placing it behind her on the coffee table. Alex continued talking as Danny stood before her and gently removed her light coat from her shoulders, letting it slide down her arms to be dropped once clear of those slender appendages to the floor. Danny's arms encircled Alexandra's waist as the talking slowed, and Alex gracefully placed her arms across Danny's shoulders. They gently pulled each other closer and kissed at the end of the sentence. Alexandra's right hand cupped the back of Danny's neck, and her left hand moved over her shoulder like the waves across a smooth and powerful stone. Alex moved her left hand down Danny's chest and came to rest on her right breast. Danny, loving the thrill, used great restraint to pull away from the embrace. "Easy there, sweet Alex," she said, removing her love's hand from her breast. "It feels great, but let's walk a little before we sprint." "Yes, ma'am," Alexandra said with the charm of a brilliantly devious smile, before crouching down to retrieve her light coat from the floor while keeping eyes locked on Danny. Danny stepped back as Alex stood up, taking the coat and hanging it up in the small closet perpendicular beside the front door while she talked. "Have you had anything to eat?" "I'm not hungry," Alex said, "for food." Danny turned from the closet in which the coat now hung and presented a lopsided smile at the sultry saying from the dear beauty before her. The beauty giggled in understanding how absurd the statement must have sounded, and the laugh took some of the tension away from the moment. Each felt a little more comfortable, and neither was nervous with the desire between them. "When was the last time you ate?" Danny asked. "About 2 hours ago, while you were at dinner." "And what did you have?" "I grabbed a couple of tacos and a fajita from Juan in a Million." She referenced a local restaurant, and Danny detected that she might be feeling only slightly ridiculous doing such, yet was completely comfortable with that ridiculousness. "Good," Danny said, moving to the couch and sitting. "So that was a substantial meal." Alex picked up the bottle and removed the bag sheath. "So this won't make me pass out." Danny took the bottle from her hands and looked at the label. "A good choice," she said as Alexandra was taking a seat on the couch. Danny put the bottle on the table, and we can find out how good a little later. But right now, she picked up the box of matches and extracted a little wooden fire starter. "I want us to relax and enjoy the ambiance we create just by being together." She pulled the match, and it ignited with a flourish that quickly exhausted the chemicals from its head, and the fire faded to a steady burn that worked to consume the fibers of the wood. Danny picked up a small candle, each of them one at a time, and made certain the wick held a tiny shard of flame. "These are soy candles," she told Alex. "They do not emit the level of toxins that the paraffin candles do, but they also do not give off as strong an aroma." She blew out the match and placed it in the bowl base of one of the candles. Turning to Alex on her left, she said, "As we relax, tell me what scents you think these candles are." And she turned to her right, leaning over the arm of the couch. "Well, I can tell one of them is sandalwood," Alex said, and Danny looked back in surprise. "Because there are remnants of the label on the side of it," she said innocently, and smiled in response to Danny's glance, which dropped the astonishment like a 40-ton anchor. "All right, clever girl," Danny conceded. "That's one, but try to figure out the other two by olfactory means." She smiled with pride that she included the word olfactory in conversation. She leaned over the arm of the couch again, and this time located the dimmer switch for the track lighting. The room took on the hue of quality romance. "Nice," Alex remarked, and leaned back on the couch. "One more thing," Danny said, picking up the remote. "I have a song I would like us to listen to together." "All right," Alex would allow it. "And I would like to hold you as we are listening to it," Danny said. Alex leaned forward. "Okay," she said with calm eagerness. "Hold how?" Danny leaned back on the couch. "I want to be the big spoon and hold you while listening to Hallelujah. I love that song," Alex said, inching forward to the edge of the couch and motioning for Danny to slide between her and the back of the couch. As Danny moved behind her, Alex and she brought their legs together onto the couch. The necessary adjustments needed to become comfortable in the intimate position were easily done. This is the version that Jeff Buckley did back in 1994. The song was originally written by Leonard Cohen, and there have been so many versions. This one, though, is my favorite, and I want us to share it. The maneuvering to achieve the optimal cuddling complete, Danny pressed the button on the remote, and the sound system took the stage. The first notes of the guitar spilled out into the low-lit room like the spare feathers of angels from some otherworldly sack containing such magic and might as angels' feathers. With a voice soft and weak, beautiful yet bleak, the song entered into the atmosphere and blinked with eyes of a kitten, breathing light the heavy winds of ancient mysteries lain before humankind. Loved and feared, hated and revered, the dark light of such pains set to life caressed them, and the couch was no longer in the tiny apartment in the capital city of Texas, but drifting with listless bobbing among the untouched cosmos of heart and space, love and grace. The points of starlight in the distance wiggled and bent, and the couch was returned to the good earth by the potent powerlessness of the candle's flames purposely spending their lives in brilliant conduction of elements so as to be and be with no reason to be. A sublime terror of uselessness was only faintly detected as the music careened through their world, bridging the gaps with a languid excitement and joyful sadness. All that could be was in that moment of loving embrace, and all that ever mattered was the pulsing in their bodies, in slow connection, developed, fated, or chosen, with reason to be and become or simply to enjoy the passing nature of life as it is. This was all that could ever be of importance. This room, these sounds, the beauty of love untainted and secure, lustfully endowed to reinforce, though both were as of yet unsure just what it reinforced. For such words do not exist which communicate the moment. We can select them, speak them, chant, sing, scream, cry, or read them. But there is no description of the moment when Danny felt the true love from Alexandra as she tightened her arms in her embrace of Danny's arms wrapped around her as they laid next to each other. If there were reason for words, it would be to attempt to paint in the universe some refracted memory of a total moment so pure and of itself that the words themselves could never do proper justice to communicate its greatness, its magnificence, its essence, and how powerfully authoritative it is in making clear how the life experiencing it truly does exist. Existing in the face of vapid and unending nothingness, a lack of substance that can cause one to doubt the validity of one's own sense of existing. Existing to make some noise or voice, or a life or experience that verifies that one does indeed exist. That is the reason, as unbelievably simple as it is, for love in its grandest form. Unbounded from uncertainty of being as the closing bars of the song washed through the air around them, the unrelenting truth of her life brought Danny to tighten her own embrace on this beautiful person in her arms. She knew at that moment this young girl was the reason for her own love. The song concluded while the candle's light danced. Danny shut the stereo off and dropped the remote behind her on the couch. "Sage and amber," Alex said. Danny ran her hand along Alexandra's forearm and caressed her belly gently over her shirt before slipping her hand underneath the garment. "Absolutely right," she confirmed while basking in the exhilaration of feeling her hand upon her love's skin. Alex sighed happily, and Danny nuzzled closer, bringing her lips in contact with her love's neck. Was the younger woman's response to the gentle stimulus, and she began to turn around to face Danny. Danny leaned up, for she wanted to pursue this, but not yet. This was a feeling she wanted in her bed, not only on the couch. Noticing the move away from the intimacy, Alex followed, and soon they were both sitting on the couch. "How about we open the bottle now?" "In lieu of other endeavors," Alexandra purred. "Sure." Danny stood and walked to the kitchen area to retrieve a corkscrew. "We have all night to cuddle." "I was hoping for more than spoonerism," Alex said. Danny stopped and looked back to her. "Spoonerism?" she asked. "Yeah," Alex said, a little curious as to the question. "What we were just doing." Laughing a little as she looked in the drawer for the implement, Danny shook her head. "What?" Alex asked. "It's not spoonerism," Danny said, closing the drawer and walking back to the couch. "It's spooning." "What's the difference?" Alex said with indifference to mask her embarrassment. Finding Alexandra's embarrassment to be adorable, Danny told her, "Spooning is the cuddling we were doing." She slid the two glasses toward her around the candles on the table. "And a spoonerism is a specific literary form, more a mistake which shows greater meaning than a clever quip." Danny noticed Alex was put off by the lesson, and she put the bottle down. "Baby girl, don't pout. It was a cute mistake. Very fitting if you think about it." Alex rolled her eyes and touched Danny's arm. When the smile crept back across the younger's lips, it seemed safe to continue the conversation. "So tell me, my love, what resourcefulness brought this bottle of wine to us tonight?" "Oh, it was really easy. I had Jimmy get me it," Alex said with lightness in her voice. Danny moved to open the bottle of wine, hoping that Jimmy was a member of Alexandra's family. "Who is Jimmy, and why is he okay getting a bottle of wine for a beautiful underage girl?" Danny asked, and she felt the last blissful moments of her own comfort. "He's my boyfriend, kinda," Alex responded, as though it was of no great concern. Danny stopped what she was doing and looked at Alex. "Your boyfriend?" she asked, trying to let the emphasis of the words denote the magnitude of this subject matter upon their current situation. Kinda, Alex said again, as though that additive made the phrase more palatable. Danny simply stared at her, unmoving. The air between them solidified with the coarse wrath of betrayal, and the once exposed heart, now jilted, could bring no words to Danny's mind or lips, and the pause prompted Alex to speak more. I mean, it is not really serious. He's just a guy I know from earlier in the year and I hooked up with once, Alex said, and she did not notice how Danny felt her own heart drop. So she continued, He's a good guy, and he helped me out. So you paid him to buy you the wine. Danny didn't want to know the truth, so she didn't state it with the inflection denoting an interrogatory. In a way, Alex said with a coy smile Danny felt was terribly out of place. I needed his help, and he needed my help, so... She smiled again and began to lean closer to Danny. Danny leaned away. Whoa, 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 she said quickly. What do you mean? Confused by this and trying to be reassuring, Alex said plainly, I needed the wine, and he needed to, come. You had sex with him? Danny was stunned and barely noticed that she had said those words. No, Alex said with a laugh. It used my hand. Danny repositioned herself on the couch to face Alex. I need you to tell me exactly what happened, she said sternly. It's not that big a deal, Danny, Alex said, unknowing how the use of her name in the phrase scathed Danny. I called Jimmy and asked to see him and went to his room. I told him that I wanted a bottle of Shiraz and that I would pay him to buy it for me. He said that he would buy it for me if I helped him out. Danny's stomach turned. So we got on his bed, and I kept my clothes on and helped him out with my hand. Danny felt sick in picturing her beautiful love grinding herself against her kinda boyfriend while squeezing him in her hand, whispering hot words to push him closer to the edge and then smiling when he erupted. And then when he went to the liquor store, well, I got something to eat, and then I met up with him at his room to get the bottle and then texted you. Dumbstruck momentarily, Danny managed to communicate how unacceptable this was. Did you even wash your hands before going to eat? The volume of Danny's voice put Alexandra's guard up, but she dropped it to forge the connection between them anew. Of course I did, silly, Alex said, and Danny shook her head and looked away. It is not that big of a deal. Jimmy is a good guy and a friend at this point. It wasn't anything terrible, and I did it to get the bottle of wine for us. Alex picked up the bottle, and Danny looked at it. I can't drink that, she said, and I think we can't be together. Alex placed the bottle back on the table. I can't undo what I did, she said, looking at the floor, and I can see it was a mistake because it hurt you. She looked at Danny with her most angelic expression, and Danny was crushed ever more by the beauty of this soul between them. But don't let my mistake ruin us. What is this? Danny asked. What is us to you? We are lovers, Alex said, inching closer on the couch. We are enjoying each other and exploring this connection we've made. She touched Danny's forearm, and the fingers seemed to burn with a venom so toxic that Danny's body demanded she move away from it. Danny stood and walked in front of the coffee table. I can't just be an exploration with you. I cannot have it be that I am an experiment of yours during your wild years. I mean, have you hooked up with anyone other than Jimmy? No, I don't need to. And Alex noticed that sounded uncaring to Danny as she said it. I mean, If I was to go for a guy, it would be him. And when I go for a girl, it is you. Danny ran her fingers through her red hair until her palms rested against her forehead, and she froze while breathing. You don't know what you want, she realized aloud as she dropped her arms to her sides. I do know what I want, Alex protested. I want to be with you. She had leaned forward with the words and then leaned back on the couch slightly. But I do want to have kids someday. The unknowing nature of this beautiful creature on her couch infuriated Danny, and her rage would have no rapport with this moment. She gathered the shredded remnants of her heart with the dignity of nobility and shook her head. She looked down to the floor. I can't do this, she said, and lifted her head. Get out. Alex gave a voiceless laugh with a gentle smile, as though the command was a cute emotional overreaction to something frivolous and minuscule. Danny wanted to be firm so that the gravity would be clear. She moved to the closet. I am not joking, she said, as she opened the door and pulled Alexandra's light coat from the hanger, tossing it at the girl, who now was bewildered by this circumstance. Danny unlocked the front door and opened it, holding it open with her foot and pointing out to the night. Get out. A look of dignity, despite offense, came over Alexandra's face, and she stood up and put her coat on. You can keep the wine, she said as she moved towards the door. If you leave it here, it is going right down the drain, Danny said, and marveled at how quickly the girl changed direction to lift the bottle from the table. Maybe you and Jimmy can enjoy it, Danny said as Alex walked out the door. Stunned by the power of Danny's last phrase, Alex turned to look at her with a shocked expression and was met with Danny shutting the door. Danny leaned her left forearm on the door and rested her forehead on her fist. She heard the incredulous exhale from Alex through the closed portal and listened as the young beauty walked down the stairs. Danny closed her eyes during this and opened them only when she heard no more footsteps. She leaned back from the door and locked the deadbolt. She took the few small steps and bent over the coffee table, extinguishing each of the candles with a plume of air from her lips. Danny collapsed back onto the couch and watched the trails of smoke from dying flames swirl their course through the stagnant air.